leanin.org, that foundation did a report along with McKinsey and Company that really highlighted the things that Samika knows are exactly what's going on. And this report basically documented her experience, her personal experience. And what I'm all about as a career and executive coach is to help empower women in ways that can help them navigate through these barriers. As a woman, I faced a lot of barriers in my career, but Samika and all of her Black women colleagues have a double barrier. And that takes a lot of internal power to navigate. And we're going to talk about that as Samika and I get into it. But Samika, welcome to this beautiful series. And I am so tickled to know where you've come through over the last several months, because when we first spoke, life in your career lane wasn't going the way that you had expected you would be going with what you bring to the table. Give us an introduction to who you are, and welcome again to the interview.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me. I am in the healthcare space, and I've worked in healthcare for about 15 years. I have had what I thought was a great career, and I feel like it is a great career, but I've definitely had some bumps and some snags along the way, some growing pains, some life lessons. And I was initially drawn to your program because I'd gotten to a place where I really felt like I was really taken off, and I had just had soaring, riding high off of really successful 5-6 year run in a new role, in a new setting, and just really starting to feel like I have finally hit my stride. All this that I've been building up for all this time, it's finally there. I'm hitting my stride. And then it was all derailed. I ran into a new encounter, a new experience, and it really felt like it was all crashing down. And the challenge that I found is that I had been compartmentalizing a lot of that angst, a lot of that energy, a lot of that baggage that has been with me on the climb up. And then when I got confronted by a much more hostile setting that really just sort of came crashing down, attacking me, I shut down. And I shut down in a way I wasn't used to shutting down. And when I looked in the mirror and evaluated myself, I realized I was a shell of myself. I had lost my voice, and I'm not a quiet person. I lost my voice, and others were writing a narrative about who I was, and I didn't have the energy or the willpower to defend myself. And I think I remember saying, I couldn't show up for myself, and I couldn't understand why and how do I get out of this, because I'm not a fighter. I just didn't know how to get out of it. And I was a little bit ashamed to need the help. But then I said, no, if I had broken my knee, I was going to the doctor and get some help.
Yes.
My soul's a little bruised. I need some help. And so that's what got me here today, because I needed to fight back to get back to who I am.
And when you get to a point where you're trying everything you've got and it's just not working, and there are people in the corporate world, well, actually every single person in the corporate world has their own baggage, their own experience filters, their own powerlessness or power syndromes. And so when that gets played out on an individual to individual basis, we can get into toxic work environment, toxic situations, and it's like we become crippled in the situation, and there is nothing that we can do. I've been in those situations myself where it's just like, I'm smart, I'm good at what I do. How am I so disabled in this scenario? I know that there's probably some things we don't want to specifically talk about, but there was a massive turnaround in the potential outcome that you were faced with when we first started working with each other. And I remember jumping on the phone with you, week one, day one, to try to help you out of a boiling pot. And things just kind of progressed. It was obvious that there needed to be a change on your part, but I think you got out of that with a lot more elegance and grace than it was looking like when we first started meeting. So bravo that you were coachable.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, because
Yeah.
you had to take some actions and show up in a certain way that wasn't feeling, I can really do that, or I'm allowed to that. So bravo to that. You got into the workshop and started understanding and appreciating what had really gone on that had basically disabled you.
Yeah.
Talk about what you found out, that all of that environmental stress, that you weren't dealing with, that maybe you had all your career and you sort of ignored it, or all your life. Dare we say that?
To some extent, yeah.
Yeah. And then as we bring your soul back to life, you can't help but to deal with it.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
what was going on in your first couple of weeks as we were helping you bring your soul back to life?
For me, the first couple of weeks, it was all about fighting for my identity,
Mm-hmm.
because I really felt like in that last chapter, there were other people were telling the story of who I am. And I just felt like I was in a box and no one could hear me talk. They couldn't see me walk the walk. They couldn't see the best of who I know I am and who everybody else in every other context
Right.
says I am and
Yeah.
knows of me.
Yeah.
And I was just crippled. I had so much anger. There was so much frustration. There was so much resentment.
Yeah.
I feel like that to keep from saying the wrong thing, I didn't say anything, or I
Mm-hmm.
didn't say enough. And before COVID time, we always talked about wearing the mask.
Yeah.
I couldn't even put on a dang mask. Like, I did
Right.
not have the
Yeah.
energy to put that mask on. And unfortunately, as a Black woman, we don't always have that luxury to say, here's who I am, deal with it. No,
Right.
you got to comport yourself in such a way that you make yourself acceptable in the culture that you're in. And if it means disarming people so that they feel comfortable with you, I can't tell you the amount of energy and how conscious I am about smiling. I smile when I am not, then there's no reason to smile. Because I
You're
have
like,
to
I'm
be
not
mindful,
happy right now, but I'm going to
right?
smile.
Because we're talking about stats, but I still have to be conscious of how the other person is perceiving and receiving me.
Yeah.
And that's just an energy that I take with me every single day. I've got to figure out who's the other person across from me. I've got to people read all the time. Who's
Mm.
this person? What do they think about me? Is that the right impression of me? What do I need to do to reprogram it? And
Yeah.
not that I should walk around with that weight of worrying about my image, but
Right.
if your career trajectory is going to be limited based on what someone thinks about you, are you too angry? Are you too analytical? Are you too hard to get along with? How
Yeah.
do I give that personality to you with sugar so that I'm accepted, so I can just get down to the work at hand?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a term that I feel like I came up with it, but it's probably already in the lexicon out there. I call it hypervigilance.
Yes.
And there is so much energy that is poured out when you have to check every data point of every personality in the room, all of the past history of dealing with them. And you're like analyzing a million points to determine just how I need to be in this moment. That is exhausting on one experience. And it is absolutely depleting and crippling and disabling if that has to be the way that you are. Now, in general, competent, successful people don't worry about that.
Right.
They are navigating themselves as to who they are and presenting their best self, which is consistent and confident. I mean, I don't really love the word confidence because, it feels too superficial to me.
Yeah.
But so as you started diving into your soul, realizing that you had spent your entire life being hypervigilant and getting exhausted over that, what did you find out about yourself and get locked in, let's call it, on?
I would say that who I am and where I am is enough and it's okay. And that there is far more freedom in the authenticity than there is in the hypervigilance. And
Yes.
you can show up exactly who you are, exactly where. It doesn't mean that you're not supposed to be wise and that you shouldn't be strategic.
Right.
But for me, I think it was getting those toxic thoughts or those crippling thoughts out of my head so that I could get off of that wheel. Because that was the hardest thing. I think the dialogue that I carried in my mind was the toughest part of my career journey. And I had to figure out how to get out of it. And I don't even know where it started. But what I learned most out of this course was how to get out of it and really manage my emotions. Me managing my emotions doesn't always change my situation. You know, it doesn't change the frustration of not going up high enough, fast enough, but it at least helps me from a self-care perspective so that I can show up better. You know, one thing I noticed about interviewing while I was in this course versus what interviewing looked like beforehand, I felt desperate. I felt like every time I went into an interview, I had everything riding on this and I had to do well. I had to click every single box. And I just remember you and the coaches helping me set the stage for, oh, I'm going to enjoy this conversation. I look forward to this conversation, getting to know this group of people. And when I went into interviews with that different mindset, I feel like I showed up better because I pulled all of that energy, that negative energy out of the equation. And then I sit here and I have a 6-7 person panel interview and kill it because we're just having a conversation with 6-7 awesome people at a great company that I'd like to work for.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, that to me is definition of freedom. I get to be who I am. I get to enjoy who I am. And I get to enjoy other human beings on my journey and on my ride as being a human being and not be caught up into the pain and agony of my past experiences or an identity that I'm supposed to be trying to figure out every single second. Like you cannot navigate that way.
Right.
When you bring your soul back alive, you know, there's some techniques obviously that we teach all the ladies in the workshop. And then as you go through that, you got to get yourself off the hook, don't you?
Yes.
That's a big part of getting that freedom is to take yourself off the hook. There is a process and there is a re-identification of who you are as you're doing that, isn't there?
Yes.
What did you have to give up in order to get yourself off the hook?
Excuses.
Oh,
I had to give up excuses. I had to give up the blame game too. I had to say, this is where I am. This is what happened, but I can have a different experience. Even if the environment doesn't change around me, I can still have a different experience right where I am. And the Miracle Morning, which you see on my bookshelf.
I see that book peeking out over there.
Made all the difference. It's all about mindset and framing how you start your day. It doesn't stop craziness from happening at 8:10, but it sure does frame how you handle that craziness at 8:10. And you don't still have to be wearing that craziness by 11:45. You can still be there, but your energy isn't in it. Your energy is different. And that's what I had to do. I had to just say, you know, listen, we're going to wipe the board clean. We're not going to have excuses. We're not going to play the blame game. We recognize that it is what it is. But what we need is a game plan for how we navigate this better, because that's how you're going to show up for yourself. That's how things are going to change, even if it's incremental, even if it's monumental. But I got to show up better in order to facilitate that.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know, we do a lot of energetic work. We talk about the soul. We talk about the subconscious. We talk about the programming that's basically running the show underneath it. We're not conscious of a lot of it. You became conscious of what was running the show for you, which is all about getting rid of excuses, taking full responsibility for who you are and how you are in the world. And when we begin to do that and we take ourselves off the hook for any other, you know, it's basically we forgive ourselves and others, we free all that energy up. Now the energy that fuels us is within us. It's our divine essence. It's beautiful, it's powerful, it's pure, it's love, it's joy, it's happiness. We can see our talents, we can see our gifts, we can see what we bring to the table. We don't have to be apologetic about any of that.
Right.
And that energy is like the most pure energy that a human being can run on. And the corollary to that is that we no longer are Velcro for all of the negative things that are going on. And that's basically what you just described. If negative stuff happens, it doesn't stick to me anymore.
Right. It certainly doesn't stick for long.
No. Right. Yeah. So it's like a process. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, that's interesting. Huh. Does that matter to me? Is that something I need to pay attention to? Nope. I'm going to still be me, and I'm going to still be awesome, and I'm going to leave that behind. That person looks at me the wrong way, says something, their problem, moving right along.
Right. I
So
can sift so much better and just take from what I need, and that what I don't need that doesn't serve me, let it go. Just
yeah,
let it drop.
yeah, yeah. You were in the process of interviewing for different roles, considering where you wanted to play, how you wanted to play. Um, you decided to hit a restart and get yourself situated into something with a whole big load of potential for yourself. How are you feeling about your new journey and what's ahead of you?
I could not be more excited. I am beyond thrilled. My energy level is exactly, it sort of mirrors where my soul is today. I
Yeah,
mean, I feel like yellow, like with this sunshine, joy, the opposite of the gray, black grime, gloom
right,
that was sort of on my
right.
heart and my spirit and my soul when I came, into
Yeah,
your course in the spring. I mean, it's a complete night and day. I feel encouraged. I feel optimistic, and I'm ready to learn a whole new industry, a whole new section of my industry. And I'm
yes.
ready to take the world by storm. And I
Ooh,
feel like the reset, the baggage, the board being cleared is really exactly what I needed to show up for myself in a way that I'm comfortable and I feel most authentic. I am absolutely here for the journey. And I'm excited to feel valued again. And I think that a lot had to do with how I was able to communicate who I am and who I have the capacity to be in this organization. And that comes from a change in my mindset.
right on. Because now you have an attractor pattern around your awesomeness versus an attractor pattern around being a victim or being always held back or always judged. That again, that hypervigilance creates such an attractor pattern that you have to be attracting negativity when you're living in a negative zone. Now that you're in your soul, you're in your brilliance, you've been able to witness and see more of your brilliance being reflected back to you. You were bragging with me a little bit earlier, and I'm just so delighted that you're getting reflected back to you how awesome you are in multiple ways. I want you to brag about something that's happened to you locally, because you deserve to be bragging about that. So what award or distinction have you received lately, Samika?
Well, I will be in a few weeks, but I was recently informed that I am in a local business journal, one of the 2020 women to watch in my
Yes.
city. And that feels amazing to get that positive reaffirmation of, you know who you are. And
Right.
guess what? Other folks know who you are, but you
Yeah.
stand in who you are. And by the way, we'll give you this booster to remind you if you ever get off track or let anyone tell you who you're not.
Right.
No.
Right. And what a great year to have that distinction.
Yes.
Because I mean, this is like a Dickens story starting out. It was the worst of years. It was the best of years.
Indeed. It was the worst of times. My
Right.
goodness gracious. Pandemic.
Right. And as you know, in going through the workshop and hanging with your kick-ass sisters and watching them going through the journey, you weren't alone at all.
No. No, and I think that was probably the added bonus that I couldn't even have expected or anticipated is going through it with other women who had similar stories or different stories altogether, but that team experience of really helping you get perspective. And then for me to be there for other people as well, to again share our stories and how we can support one another. That just made the experience all the more sweet and rich and rewarding and life-changing. And I loved every bit of it, every
Yeah.
moment of it.
Yeah, it's cool. And the sisterhood carries on. So
Yeah.
that's something that I'm super proud of having created for all the gals who have gone through the 12-week workshop to claim their brilliance back and move their careers in a trajectory that just is zooming ahead. and everyone has common vocabulary,
Mhm.
common understanding of their soul shining, their brilliance. And to be in a group of women who continue to express positivity toward each other, who are allowed to brag in front of each other and not feel bad about shining. And I know a lot of women have a perhaps a past or a history of feeling like they couldn't shine in front of other women. There's as you know, like, you know, a myth or a legend or maybe even some reality around women being jealous of each other. I think it's a very primal thing that goes back to, you know, the very basics of human procreation and that sort of thing. So, so not being in any negativity with a sisterhood of continued elevating each other, to me is just a great community energy, and you contribute to it by being awesome and by having a great story and great things to celebrate. What would you say to either yourself several months ago or another woman who is feeling herself stuck in this paralyzed state of, I don't even know how to get out of this horrible situation, and is there a different life for me? Because I think that's what happens when you get paralyzed in that environment. You don't even think that there's another way to live. What would you say to someone in that situation?
I would, I definitely, what I said to myself in that situation is there is hope, and that you don't have to stay where you are. You don't have to be ashamed to be where you are. What you have to be is brave and willing to show up.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and I'm a Christian, so I will sometimes, slip back into Christian references.
Yeah.
But sometimes you've got to be vulnerable enough to be that lame person laying on the mat and let your friends lower you down to the resources that are available. And that, in scripture, the friends lowered the friend down to Jesus and to the healing. But
Yeah.
sometimes you just gotta let people rally around you and
Right.
support you.
Yes.
And that's where I needed some people to rally around, to pull out of me where I was, to understand my needs, and then to pour back into me to build me back up.
Yes.
Don't, just because you got stuck, you don't have to stay stuck.
Right on. Right on. Now, one of the things that I feel particularly satisfied and fulfilled about is women who have families, partners that are the corollary of their suffering. Because when you're suffering at work, you're coming home that way.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't hide. And sometimes it's the only place where you can actually be just a little bit more emotionally free is your home. Now, you've got two small kids, you got a husband who loves you. How has that been affected by your soul coming back alive and you being in your brilliance?
I think all of my relationships have changed for the better because my energy is way different. The negativity is almost nil in comparison, or at the very least, learning how to process it better.
Mhm.
It comes out of your mouth the way you feel, and when you're instantly snappy and,
Yeah, yeah,
and that has changed, dramatically. The lack of optimism, all that has changed dramatically. And I feel like it definitely has changed the intimacy between my husband and I, the way we process and deal with and talk about, life in general, life that's happening around us. There's a lot of life, negativity happening outside of our house.
right on.
And yet I'm showing up in a way that makes all of those conversations so much better than they were, 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And I would say all of my relationships have improved because me in those relationships has
Yeah.
improved.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've got two young boys, and you shared some stories about being their mom when we did the Black Women's Lives Matter series. And I, again, appreciate and thank you for participating in that as well. And you elaborated on some of the fear that you had around raising them in the context of what's been going on in this country for the past, hundreds of years, but let's say in the past, 10-ish years, because I don't think your kids are older than 10. But there's got to be a different level of love and consideration and energetic vibe that you're able to be with them at a different level rather than fear. I would imagine.
I definitely agree, because this year alone, I've had to have much more frank conversations with my oldest child. My oldest child is 11.
Yeah.
And I did mention to you that a few years ago, when the incident in Ohio with Tamir Rice, when this 12-year-old boy was
Yes.
killed, I just, I think the sense of fear really
Yes.
did take over me. And I know that for a short while, I did overcorrect. I
Yeah.
was concerned. I wouldn't even let them play with Nerf guns, for goodness sake. I mean,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was a different experience for Black boys. And I
Yeah.
did overcorrect for a while, wouldn't let them play with it. Or if they did play with it, they had to, be in the backyard. I mean, we just
Right.
took all these, overly measured precautions because of fear.
Mhm.
But again, being in a different headspace, being more rational, being more calm and not as emotional, we've been able to talk about it more, to talk about it from a different place, and to be, I won't necessarily say optimistic, but to be more clear, more decisive, more sure-footed about this is what it is and here's how we're going to get through it.
Yeah.
And those conversations are better
Yeah.
because how I process it is better.
Right.
And I'm not projecting that fear. I am projecting a sense of reality, but here's what we're going to do about it. And
Right.
that's a very different conversation than running and hiding and getting in our shells and panicking. And,
Right.
it's a very different plan as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. And your experience being a Black woman, specifically in the workplace, which is what most of our conversation has been about. But the element of feeling bad about who you are and what that creates, I think to me is really the ultimate lesson. No matter what race, nationality, or gender we are, if we feel bad about who we are, first of all, I believe that is like the biggest sin we can make against our Creator. If we're in the likeness and image of our Creator, we have to get to a place where we feel awesome about who we are, because that's our divine destiny as a human being on this planet. And it's so easy to have the external affairs of life manipulate
Yes.
our interpretation of who we are. And I know who you are, and I know how you are now in the world. And I'm delighted that you're going to bless your kids with sense and feeling of not feeling bad about who they are.
Right.
And the generation of Black kids being raised by their moms now, who become empowered, who become driven by their divinity and their soul rather than by their fear, is going to absolutely change an entire generation. And truthfully, we can't change people out there who have prejudices or anger.
Right.
We cannot change that. What we can only change is who we are and how we show up. Not that it needs to be tolerating other people's angers, fears, prejudices. There's a different spin on that. The spin is, I am worthy. And when we travel the world, I am worthy, I am awesome, we're going to get a different energetic experience in the world. And I think we touched on this right before the interview. I think the overriding theme of what's happening in the human experience right now is that the power base of who had power is eroding. Mm-hmm. And so there's a new power emerging. And we talked about privilege a little bit earlier, and how people who have power protect it in very subtle but dramatic ways. And when you feel powerful yourself as an individual person, whether you're a Black woman, a Latina woman, a Black man, a white woman, whoever you are, when you feel powerful because you're endowed by your Creator, you begin to shift the entire way that power is translated in the world. Mm-hmm. And power has been very hierarchical. It's been very demeaning of the people without power, and keeping people in their place, not giving them access to power. I mean, basically, that's the bottom line. Privilege is about, you can't have the power I have. I'm going to make sure I keep you out of that. I mean, that's really what we're talking about when you boil it all down. Okay. So how you navigate the world now as a powerful Black woman, tell me what you see for your future.
I know that my future is bright. I know who I am. I stand in that. I stand in that power,
Yeah.
and I know my worth. I know what is acceptable and what's
Yeah.
not acceptable. And
Right.
if I'm in a space where my worth is not being appreciated and valued, I don't have to stay in that space. I certainly don't have to be traumatized by that space either, because more than anything, I'm my responsibility, and it's my responsibility to shield myself from the trauma. You might try to serve it to me. I don't have to take it.
And that is just so powerful, because as you know, because of the experience you had in having the community of women who you saw all emerging, women and Black women in particular. And I've got a Latina woman in the workshop who just started, and she has the same exact story. Our choice of what we will put up with, what we will tolerate, what we will stay in, that beginning point is the whole thing.
Right.
I deserve to be happy, recognized, appreciated, powerful, making money, having a great contribution in the world. I deserve that. And therefore, my life is going to be in concert with that. I'm going to be in alignment with that. And that's how I'm going to make my choices.
Right.
And I am so freaking happy that that's where you're coming from, and that's the basis of your life and your career, and that you're being recognized and seen for the awesome human being that you are. And I'm delighted that you shared your story today, and I know that this is going to inspire countless other women who will see themselves in your story and will realize that there is a possibility, a hope, an opportunity for them to walk through that threshold that you walked through and claim something more. And that really is the lesson of being compressed, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Like it like pushes you into a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And in so many ways, spiritually, we thank our persecutors for giving us the strength to move away from them.
Right.
And I'm just so happy inside, seeing you smile, knowing how awesome and brilliant you are, and knowing that the world is seeing that, and that you're seeing it, and that you wake up every morning knowing that you're awesome and brilliant. Anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up here, Samika?
I would just like to say thank you for this experience. Your very intentional process, the entire infrastructure that I've had the opportunity to be enriched from has just made all the difference. Every bit of it, the whole village has made a big difference on my life. I feel it. And when your slogan of bring your soul to work, when that got my attention, it pulled me in, and my soul thanks you too.
Yeah.
Because we're going places.
Right.
We left things by the wayside. So thank you.
You are absolutely welcome. My heartache and my struggles in my 30-year plus career, I clawed every way up to a level of contribution I really felt that I wanted to have in the world. And I'm grateful for all of the pain I suffered, because it came with some successes as well. But it was the pain that I suffered that allowed me to put together a methodology that other women can follow to achieve what you've achieved. And it's just really my pleasure to have helped lift you, and now you're ready to shine and create something brand new, awesome, and change the trajectory of your family forever.
Absolutely.
And your life forever. So you and I will not, this is not the last time we see each other. And I just can't wait to keep watching you blossom and bloom and be even more powerful, and continue to be a role model for other women and Black women. And you know what? And maybe even some men. Because when we shine, everyone around us gets affected in a positive way and feels better about themselves. And that's the brilliance of being in your awesome, soulful power. It changes the world.
It does.
Yeah.
It
Beautiful.
Thank you
For sharing your story. And folks, Samika is a very, very wonderful, awesome example of how we can go from the lowest points of a career in our life and reach back up into the highest version of ourselves. Thank you for your generous comments, Samika. the kick-ass workshop that I have created and found and lead really does have a secret formula for bringing women back alive in their careers. And I'm humbled and grateful that it came through my efforts of my career. And we serve hundreds of women every year in a very unique, special way. And Samika, thanks again for joining me. Folks, it's mofaul.com. And if you want to get started, we have a really open conversation called a complimentary career clarity call. And that's at mofaul.com/strategy. Let's talk about what's going on in your career. And if we can help you, we will absolutely lift you to your highest level. Samika, thank you so much.
Thank you.